Well, good morning, brothers and sisters. I'm glad you've joined me for today's devotion. We are in the book of Proverbs, chapter 24. And while you're opening there, and I hope you've already read the chapter, but as you're opening, yesterday I encourage you, if you're on Instagram, to follow me, Steve_Hogg. Today, I'd like to ask those of you who are on Twitter to follow me. And my address, or whatever they call it, I'm old, I don't know, but I think it's at Rev Steve Hogg. That'll be on the screen there too. So follow me on Twitter, and just another way to communicate with you, and I appreciate you following me. All right, Proverbs chapter 24. The heading that I wrote after reading this chapter that I wrote in my journal is responding to and dealing with wicked, sinful people. Because you and I, as followers of Christ, live in a world that's so messed up. And it creates a lot of temptation, a lot of tension, a lot of challenges for us. And there's some things in here I think are good for us to be reminded about. Look at verse 1 of chapter 24. He says, "Do not be envious of evil men, nor desire to be with them." Sort of like we talked about yesterday. Don't be envious or jealous of sinners and what they have. Don't spend your life seeking their approval. Wanting to, I got to hang out with that person. I got to hang out with that person. I got to hang out with that crowd. Don't live like that. Verse 19, he says, "Do not fret because of evildoers." Now, can we be honest? A lot of followers of Jesus today are worried sick because the world is so messed up. I got news for you. The world's always been messed up. Have things changed in America? Yes. It's also true that we're more aware of what's going on. But nonetheless, what he says here is do not fret, do not be anxious, don't worry. The way some Christians worry all the time, it is a sin because God says don't do it. Because, why? Why does God tell us not to fret over evildoers and sinners? Well, look at verse 20. He says in verse 19, "Do not fret because of evildoers or be envious of the wicked." Verse 20, "For there will be no future for the evil man. The lamp of the wicked will be put out." In other words, ultimately, the wicked person's end, the way his or her life ends up, and when they stand before God, it's not a good ending. You don't want any part of that. So God is saying, if you don't want any part of how badly things are going to end for them, don't worry about them now and let them influence you. Don't try to emulate them, hang out with, you don't want to go where they're going and end up the way they're going to end up. So why are you worried about what they think about you or what they have? Stop it. Verse 25. He said, "But to those who rebuke the wicked will be delight, and a good blessing will come upon them." Yesterday we talked about how you can't always convince a fool, so don't waste a lot of time trying. But here's what he's saying is there are times to rebuke people who are wicked, and in particular people who are in places of leadership and authority, of influence. You may not convince them, but they need to be rebuked when they're doing evil. Think about all that's happened in our country in the last several decades in the areas of sexual abuse, and how many public figures with authority, influence, acted wickedly and covered it up, protected those who were hurting people. People like that need to be rebuked. Don't cover it up. If they do wrong, call it out. Racist, people who are prejudiced, whose behavior is prejudiced, whose talk and comments are prejudiced, call it out. And God says when you do that, He's going to bless you. Now, how we do that matters as well. Look at verses 17 and 18. In verses 17 and 18, he says, "Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles. or the Lord will see it and be displeased and turn his anger away from him, away from the person who fell. He's going to turn his anger away from that person and direct some of it at you. So look at that again. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles, or the Lord will see it, see your reaction, and be displeased, unhappy, and turn his anger away from him, from the person that fell. We live in a got you culture. Our culture loves building people up to tear them down. And in the church, in the Christian world, especially on Facebook and Twitter, oh my goodness, how sinful and unbiblical so many of God's people are on Facebook and Twitter. Got you? Rejoicing over people's failure, or even if they fail because they sin. God says, don't rejoice over when a sinner messes up. Don't rejoice over that, because it displeases God. You see, we as followers of Christ are to be different. We are to, yes, rebuke evil, but we are to be brokenhearted when people's lives fall apart. We're to have some humility and some grace and some sadness. And I'm just tired. I don't know how to say it other than I'm just tired of so many Christians trying to stand for God's truth, but doing it in an evil way. Doing it the way the world does it, rather than how God does it. Our words and our demeanor should show more grace and more dignity and more calmness and more gentleness than anybody else on the planet, even when we are speaking the truth and dealing with the sin of wicked people. Because you can be right, but if you're mean and you're angry and you're boastful and you gossip and you tear people down and you rejoice when they fail and you celebrate their demise and you spread half-truths on Facebook and Twitter, God says he's displeased with you. So Christians, stand for the truth, the wisdom of God. Be open and honest about sin, but do it like a follower of Jesus, not like some madman in the world. Christians, we have failed miserably at that in recent years as a whole, because we take our cues in terms of how we're to speak about stuff from the world more than we do God. Truth without grace does not please God. And that's the word for today. God bless you, and I'll see you tomorrow.